Hi everyone, my name is Mark Moikins from Big Mountain Studio, and I'm standing in front of the beautiful Mount Timpanogos. I hope you enjoy this next video, and thanks for watching. Okay, new in Xcode 9 and iOS 11, you now have the ability to not only swipe left to delete something, but you can also swipe right and show additional actions. You can also customize these actions with colors and different icons. And this is all built in now. You don't have to use any third-party controls or code to do this. So if you're interested in adding custom swipe actions to your table views, then continue watching. I'll show you how you can add leading and trailing swipe actions to a row. Actions are just buttons that show up when you swipe a row. And just to be clear, in this case, when I say leading swipe actions, those are the ones on the left. And when I say trailing swipe actions, those are the ones on the right. And you might be asking yourself, well, why doesn't Apple just call it left swipe actions and right swipe actions? Well, let me cover this first before we get into this tutorial. Just real quick, I want to explain why Apple uses the words trailing and leading. It's because your apps can support languages that read from left to right, like English, and languages that read from right to left, like Arabic. So the side where the words start is always the leading side, or the leading edge. And of course, the opposite side is the trailing side, or the trailing edge. Okay, so let's jump into Xcode and see how we can create these leading and trailing actions. Okay, I have an Xcode project all set up, and it already has a table view. Let me show you a little bit about what this demo application does. So it's a table view that has sections, and right now I have this pending section, and I can change people's statuses to accepted, rejected, or waitlist. And I want to be able to do that with swipe actions. I want to just be able to take this row and swipe it left or right and be able to accept them, reject them, or put them on a wait list, or delete them as well. So I'm going to show you how to do that. We'll start by going into the view controller, and let's stop this app for now. And in my main view controller, it just basically sets up a table view, gets all the data, and I use extensions to break out which functions belong to the UITableView data source and which functions belong to the UITableView delegate. Now the functions that we're concerned with are actually in the TableView data source. So I'm going to add them right here. Now remember, I talked about leading swipe actions and trailing swipe actions, right? So that's what you want to look for, leading and trailing. So if you start typing in TableView, and then start typing in either leading or trailing. So I'll start with leading, and then you can see the function right here. So I'll just use that one. And the other one we want is the trailing. And it's already the first one because I used it before. Okay, good. Okay, so there's our two functions right there. And of course we have to return something. That's why it's giving us this error here. And what we want to return is this UI swipe action configuration. And basically what this class does is it gathers up all your swipe actions together and is responsible for presenting them. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create some actions, some swipe actions. And I talked about being able to change the status for each person in a cell, right? So when I swipe right, I want to be able to accept them or put them on a wait list. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create two actions for that. And we'll start with the accept one. I'm not going to use the image. I'm going to just create a variable here. And I want to instantiate a contextual action. This is your swipe action here. And we'll just use this convenient initializer here. Okay, so the first thing it asks us for is the style. And for this, if you just click dot, you can see there's only two styles. There's destructive and normal. Destructive, is normally for things like deleting, right? Oh, it says right there, an action that deletes data or performs some kind of destructive task. So accepting someone isn't a destructive task. For most of the cases, everything's going to be normal except for a delete. Now for the title, this is the text that you want to show in your swipe action. So we'll just call it accept. And you don't need text. You can leave this blank if you want and just show an icon. And I'll show you how to do that later. Okay, now the handler is what code do you want to run when they select that action. So I'm just going to hit enter, and it's going to set up my closure here. And I'm just going to rename these variables here to action, view, and then I'm just going to have nil. Okay, so for the action, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to print to show that we actually did accept. I'm not actually going to get into the code of doing anything at this time. This is just to show you guys how to set this up, this swipe actions. Okay, now that we have our swipe action, what we want to do is add this to our swipe actions configuration, because this handles all of your actions that are going to be displayed. So let's just copy that. And for now, what I'm going to do is just do a return. And I'm going to create a new one of these. And as you can see here, it just takes an array of your actions that you set up. So you can have multiple actions. We'll start with one for now so I can show you just what it looks like. Okay, I can't run the project now because this is going to give me an error right here. So let's set up one action for our trailing. And we do want to delete action, so let's set that up. Whoops. It wants to use that image. We'll use that image later. Okay, there's our swipe action. We're going to use the default constructor here. And this one is going to be destructive. And again, for the handler, I'm just going to hit enter, and I'm going to rename these to action, view, and I'm going to change this to nil. Okay. And then I'm going to do something similar here. So we'll just copy this line, put it down here, and then I'll change this to our delete action. Okay, so let's run that and see what that looks like. All right, there's our accept action when we swipe right, and when we swipe left, we should see the delete. There it is. All right, good, everything's looking good. So let's finish adding the rest of our actions now. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the wait list to this array. So it'll show two actions. And then here we're going to add a reject action. And then I want to also return that in the array. Okay, good. So let's run that, see what that looks like. Okay, now when I swipe, I have, oh, there we go, two actions, accept and waitlist. And then there's something else I want you to kind of notice here. Notice when we create our swipe actions configuration, so it starts off with accept and waitlist. And you notice that accept is the first one and waitlist is the second, just like it shows here. And then when we swipe in the other direction, delete is on the left side and then reject. So if we look at the code here, delete was the first one and reject was the second one. So just know that whatever the first one is that you add, it's the one that's going to be closest to the edge of your phone. Okay, everything's looking good, except we have gray colors now, and that might not be too appealing to your users or for your user experience. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some of our own custom colors here. And you can do that by adding colors to the contextual action. Now, if we look at this contextual action, it's actually a pretty simple object. I'm going to hold down Command and right click on the object. If we go here, there's not very many properties. So it's a very simple object that you can work with and not get overwhelmed with. Already, we're using the title to provide the string that shows. The handler is the code that gets run when you click on it. The style, that's the normal or destructive. So we're already using three of these just in the constructor. And now we're going to set the background color, and later we'll set the image. And that's it. That's the whole UI contextual action object right there. All right, so let's set some colors for these guys. And I'm going to use color literals. Now I don't have to add a color for delete because it defaults to red when the style is set to destructive. But I want the red to be not so bright. I want it to kind of match my UI, which is darker colors. So I'm going to use a darker color for it. Okay, so let's see how it looks with the colors. Oops, dragging too far here. Okay, it looks a lot better with the colors, right? They're more distinguishable instead of that gray. Okay. Now one of the things I kind of want to show you here is this length of the string. And iOS does a pretty good job at managing that. So, but what happens when we have a really long string? How much can we actually fit in here? So let's do an experiment here. Let's go into accept, and what we'll do is we'll just keep copying that. All right, that should be long enough for our purposes. Okay, so as you can see, it makes the font a little bit smaller and then it wraps it. It'll maximize it to 2 lines, and then once it can't fit anymore, it'll just use ... So keep that in mind. You can expand your text a little bit, but I would recommend keeping it as short as possible. Now before, I mentioned what trailing and leading means and how that's different from right and left, because in different cultures and different languages, not all languages read from left to right. So what happens is if you make an app that can be deployed to a country that reads from right to left, the opposite direction of English, then it'll swap everything around. And let me show you what that looks like. You can actually test that pretty easily right in Xcode. So what you want to do is you want to come up here to your scheme, and you want to create a new scheme. And I'm just going to call this my right to left scheme. Click OK. And then now that I'm in that scheme, I want to edit it. All right. So what you want to do is it'll probably default to build, but what you want to do is you want to come to run, go to options, and then down here you'll notice application language. So let's click on that and scroll all the way down to the bottom till you get down to the pseudo languages. And what I'm going to select is this right to left pseudo language. Okay, close that. And now watch what happens when I run this application. Notice everything gets swapped around, right? And iOS does this automatically. You don't have to configure this at all. And when I swipe this way, the wait list and the accept are on this side. So in a right to left language or culture, your leading edge is on the right side because text reads from right to left. So your leading is always where the sentence starts or always where the words start. And the trailing edge is where they end. So now the delete and reject is on this side. And notice it even did this. It even swapped around my text and icons here that I have for people. So that's pretty cool. Okay, we're just going to switch that back. So let me show you one more thing about this app and these swipe actions. Notice when I swipe all the way over, it will delete. Well, it doesn't actually delete, it just prints it out down here because I don't have an action for it. And when I swipe all the way over here, it changes to accept. And this is pretty interesting too. This is another thing I noticed. And I don't know why this is, but notice when you swipe to the right, it doesn't come all the way over like delete does. So if we look at delete, delete fills up the whole row, right? But when you swipe to the right, it only takes up maybe like 60% of the row. I don't know why that is. But this is a default behavior. So you notice when I swiped all the way to the right, it activates accept. It prints out down below in our output. So we can disable this full swiping. It's called full swiping. And we can disable that from happening. And let me just teach you a little bit about that. Okay, so this is a default action. By default, the user can fully swipe all the way to the right or to the left, and the action that is the furthest to the right or furthest to the left is the one that will be executed. It's always the actions on the very end that you can fully swipe. And like I said before, you can prevent users from fully swiping a row. It's a Boolean property, that is on the UI swipe actions configuration. Remember, the UI swipe actions configuration is that object that manages all your actions. And the property that you want to change is called performs first action with full swipe. So all you have to do is just set it to false and you're all set. So let's go back into our app and add this, just so you guys can see what's happening here. And I'll do it with the leading actions here. Okay, in order to set that property, I need to put this into a variable, right? And it's right here. Performs first action with full swipe. By default, it's true, so we're going to set it to false. And then we're going to return that configuration. Okay, let's test that. All right. Now I try to swipe all the way to the right and it won't let me. This is as far as I can go. Okay, good. So that's how you handle full swipes. You can turn them on or off. It's up to you. Now, the next thing I want to get into is adding icons, because I think it would look a little bit better if we add icons to these actions, right? Okay, the UI contextual action is a pretty cool object because it's really easy to add icons to the swipe actions. And as we saw before, it's just an image property. There are a couple of points to observe. First, your icon can be any color, but iOS will change it to white every time. I've tried a bunch of different ways to change it to a different color, but I really haven't found a way. If there is a way to change it to a different color besides white, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to learn about that. So now that you know that you'll always have a white icon, don't choose a background color for your action that is too light, or it'll be harder to see your image. The same goes with the text too. The text is always white. So that's one thing to observe. The icon and the text will always be white. And another thing I've noticed too is that you have to experiment with the size of the icon. Normally, the cell height is 44 points, right? And I find that a 30 by 30 icon works pretty well for that. But in this app, I have a cell that's 100 points high. And so I tried it with a 30 by 30 icon, 40 by 40, and a 50 by 50. And I kind of think I like the 40 by 40 icon best for this row height. So that's what I'm going to go with. Okay, so this will be pretty easy. We're going to go back into Xcode and we're going to add some images to our swipe actions. And I'm also going to show you how we can prevent swipe actions from showing up in different sections. Okay, we're going to start with the accept. And we have our image here. And I'm just going to use an image literal. I already have my icon here. Might be a little hard to see because it's actually a black icon, but like I said before, it's going to show up as white. All right, good. We got all of our images set. Now let's see how that looks. All right, much better. So as you can see, it's pretty easy to change the colors and add images. iOS did a great job with setting this up for us. Okay, so now we can change the status of these people. We can accept them, put them on a wait list. We can reject them or delete them. And the idea is that they'll go down into these other sections once we do those actions. But if you look down here, the accepted, they still show these actions like accept and wait list. And for this app, I don't want to do that. The only thing I really want to do is if someone's accepted, I want to be able to delete them. And same with all these other people. The only thing I want to be able to do is just delete them. I don't want these other actions to show up. So an easy way to do that is I can just look at the index path that's passed in. And the index path tells you what row you're on and what section you're in. So we're going to look at the section that we're in. And if we're in the first section, we want to show all the actions, right? So for the leading actions, if I'm not in section 0, I just want to exit out of here. Or rather, return a nil. And I can return a nil because you see that this action that's returned, or this configuration object that's returned has a question mark, so that means it's optional. Now down here it's going to be a little bit different. I always want a delete action, but I don't always want a reject action, right? So what I'll do is I'll create an if statement. And basically what I'm going to do is just change this line so it just returns a delete action instead of a delete and a reject if I'm not in section 0. So if I am in section 0, then I want both of these actions. But if I'm not, then I'm just going to return a configuration without the reject option. There we go. All right, so let's try that. Okay, we've got all the actions here. That looks fine. And down here, I can't swipe to the right, nothing happens. And when I swipe to the left, it just shows delete. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want. All right, guys, that's all I have for you. I hope you learned something useful from this. You learned about the UITableView's new leading and trailing swipe actions. And then we also learned about the UI Contextual Action, which is used to set up these swipe actions. And it's pretty simple. There's really only 5 properties that you'll probably be using, and that's the style, the title, action, setting the background color, and giving it your own custom image. All right, guys, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Consider sharing it with your friends. If you'd like to go a step beyond and help me out, then what you can do is provide a translation for the title and description of this video in your native language so that other people in your country can also find this video and learn something from it. All right, thanks, guys. Consider subscribing if you're not already subscribed, and feel free to share this video on Twitter or Facebook. Thanks.